So the auditor directs the pre-clear, the person who's getting the auditing, through this whole process, and you relive the traumatic episode, and you go through it again and again and again and again until it's relieved, and you no longer feel stress and trauma from that. And Hubbard
that's
said
called
that
exposure in the PTSD world. That's called exposure therapy, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
But the technique that's used to do that is hypnotic technique. I mean, you are put into a trance. It's a light trance, but it is a trance. And you are then directed to cast your attention back and relive the incident. And you tell the incident or narrate the incident as though you are experiencing it in the here and now. So when you do a Dianetics session, you close your eyes, you lean back, and you're like, okay, I'm walking in the room, and there's the dog, and da-da-da-da-da, and blah, blah, blah. So you're fully re-experiencing it in the here and now. And you go through this whole thing. So that's basically Dianetics in a nutshell. Hubbard called it a science. He said it was the modern science of mental health.
Without ever doing any scientific studies, right?
Yeah, there was no studies. Yeah. Hubbard was an awful researcher. In fact, he even admitted it in one of his lectures. He said he was not good at notes and note taking and studies and all that. He had case studies, but they were really just one-page write-ups of, okay, Sally Sue got bit by a dog. We ran through the incident, and she was relieved and experienced great, relief from her suffering and no longer has chronic pain in her hand. And that's the case study. And you're like, okay, can I talk to her? Do you have any evidence of this? I mean, you could have just sat down and wrote this out of your imagination. And the fact of the matter is he probably did. So, there's some evidence that he might have gone down through Georgia and gone through a mental hospital there and worked on some people there. But other than that, there is really no evidence at all that he ever did any kind of really rigorous study. And there is zero peer review of any of this. Right. Okay, so so that's how that whole thing went down.
And
so
it says that he submitted a paper on
some of this on Campbell and on Winter. And so they were true believers because they had been basically hypnotized, run through these traumatic episodes in their past, and felt relief. In the present time, they felt like they had gotten something from that. And they were all excited. They were electrified by this. I mean, Campbell was 1,000% on board, to the point that he was actually one of the board members of the original Dianetics Foundation, as well as pimping Dianetics through Astounding Magazine, which is where it first debuted. So you have the article Terra Incognita, then you have the Evolution of a Science, where he sort of lays out how he developed all of this, and it's a very nice fairy tale. And because most of it was really developed through living room conversations with Winter and Campbell and their little, screwing around in Bayhead, New Jersey. So Dianetics gets published as a book. Once the article came out in Astounding Magazine, people were really hot for it. I mean, it really was generating word of mouth. People were like, what's this all about? So Hubbard writes Dianetics, the Modern Science of Mental Health. A very, very overly long, ridiculous book. I read it 4 times when I was in the church, so I kind of am pretty familiar with that territory. And it's very long and very rambling. And he makes claims in the book Dianetics that this procedure will not just make you feel a little better, but it will result in erasing the reactive mind completely. Like, you just won't have it anymore. It'll be gone out of your mind, and you will only be operating on the analyzer or the analytical part of your mind. And this was a big, big appeal to people because Hubbard's claims about this were, if you erase the reactive mind, you will achieve a state of clear. And being clear means your intelligence rises. You no longer will suffer from any psychosomatic illness of any kind. And he really went overboard when he said diseases like leukemia, cancer, bad eyesight are all psychosomatic in nature and can be cured with Dianetics procedure. And that's right in the book. I'm not making any of this stuff up. He made hugely exaggerated claims about what the potentials of this science, supposed science, were. And he had little laws and little, formulas and things written out, and it was all just sort of very pseudoscientific. And he was trying to put his best foot forward and thinking that this was going to have academic cred. He sent it before publication. He sent it to the APA and the AMA, the American Medical Association and the American Psychiatric Association. And they both, or Psychological Association, and they both rejected it and sent it back to him, rightly so, because there was no science there. And he's claiming this is a science. And they're like, okay, where's the peer review? Where's the, if you're sending it to us for peer review, where's the evidence? Where's the case studies? Where's the notes? Where's all the stuff? And he was like, he just blew him off, right? He went, oh, well, if that's going to be your reaction, it was the same thing as when the publishers rejected Excalibur back in the day, right? Oh, wow. Well, I'll just take my toys and go home then, right? So instead, he went the popular route and tried to write this book that would have public appeal. And remember that in 1950, the state of mental health was very different than the state that it's in now. And public awareness about mental health was radically different. Psychiatrists in 1950 were guys in lab coats with spectacles and weird faces, and they would tie you up and put you in straitjackets and, shoot you up with lithium and stuff. It was not a good time for psychiatry. I mean, this was his criticisms of psychiatry at that time were valid. Orbital leucotomies and really brutal, nasty stuff in the name of mental health. So Hubbard writes this book and throws it out into America as a self-help book in a time when self-help was not a thing, right? This is way before that whole boom happened. So it enters the popular market, and it had been primed through Astounding magazine. So the first folks that were really on board were engineers and, like mechanical type people who were into sci-fi and stuff. That was a big part of the sci-fi base at that time. So they're all on board with this, and he's presenting them with what appears to be, and it was presenting itself to be, as a legitimate science of the mind that was an alternative to psychology and psychiatry. And seeing what psychology and psychiatry were doing at the time, which was either talk therapy that kind of went nowhere, it was pretty Freudian, or the mental hospitals where things were really brutal, right. The one flew over the cuckoo's nest stuff.
Right.
That was the state of mind science. And work with my neighbor or my wife or my cousin, and we can do this procedure on each other and go clear and no longer have psychosomatic illnesses, have higher IQ, have a better life. Why not? Let's do it. And so it started a legitimate movement, and it was a bestseller. It was coast to coast. And Dianetics was extremely popular when it first came out. It was commented on in Time magazine, in newspapers, Life magazine. I mean, it was a legitimate boom. So Hubbard found himself suddenly riding a wave of public popularity, and people were intensely interested in this and asking tons and tons of questions.